"I wish I had never been born poor," the daughter shouted, full of shame as she despised her mother who worked as a cleaner in her own school. But what she found in the old box revealed a sacrifice that changed everything. The sun had barely risen when Cecilia was already on her feet, hurriedly tying her brown hair into a bun. She put on her faded blue uniform and glanced at her reflection in the small kitchen mirror, where a tired face stared back at her. She sighed. "Another day," she murmured to herself, grabbing her worn-out bag and the lunch she had prepared the night before. As she locked the door of her small apartment, her eyes fell on Isabella's room. Her daughter was still sleeping, her angelic face contrasting sharply with the coldness she had shown lately. Cecilia shook her head, trying to push away the painful thoughts. The journey to school was always the same. Crowded buses, endless stops, and the indifferent gazes of strangers. Cecilia, however, used the time to plan her day. Arriving at the imposing National Elite School, she passed through the wrought iron gate, greeting the security guard with a slight smile that he barely acknowledged. Upon entering, she was greeted by the impeccable shine of the marble floor, a stark contrast to her rough hands and the persistent smell of cleaning products. In the main corridor, she could hear the laughter of students chatting animatedly. Boys carried expensive backpacks and wore sneakers that cost more than she earned in a month. Cecilia knew that Isabella was in one of those groups, trying to blend in, hiding the connection she had with the janitor. While she was cleaning the windows of one of the classrooms, Cecilia couldn't help but watch the students laugh and play. A larger group had gathered in the center, and there was Isabella, her daughter, smiling, but in a restrained way, as if she feared being noticed too much. Cecilia felt a pang in her chest. It wasn't the first time she had noticed her daughter avoiding eye contact, but she pretended not to see. As the morning progressed, Cecilia continued with her meticulous work. Passing by the cafeteria, she heard laughter that was louder than usual. Her curiosity was quickly answered when she noticed a boy pointing at her. "Look, that's Isabella's mom!" he shouted, provoking an eruption of laughter among his peers. Cecilia froze, her face burning with embarrassment. Her mind raced, trying to decide whether to confront the boy or simply ignore him. She opted for the latter, quickly moving on to the next task, but it was too late. The rumor spread like wildfire. In the classroom, Isabella felt the piercing stares of her classmates. Marcella, one of the most popular and cruel girls, approached her, smiling sarcastically. "So Isa, is your mom cleaning our classroom too? Maybe she can help me with my bag. It's really heavy," she said, provoking more laughter. Isabella tried to defend herself. "My mom is an honest worker, better than some people who only know how to criticize." But her voice trembled, betraying her insecurity. The attempt to respond only fueled more comments. When the bell rang for recess, Isabella rushed out, avoiding contact with anyone. She hid in the bathroom, tears falling silently as she replayed the cruel words in her mind. Cecilia finished her shift earlier that day, noticing that the mocking gazes came not only from the students, but also from some staff members. She returned home with a heavy heart, wishing she could understand why everything seemed so difficult. When she arrived at the small apartment, she found Isabella sitting on the couch, her eyes red from crying. "Isa, what happened?" Cecilia asked, approaching her with concern. "Do you really want to know, Mum?" Isabella began, standing up abruptly. "I spent the whole day listening to jokes about you. Everyone knows my mom is the janitor at that ridiculous school." Cecilia tried to speak, but Isabella didn't stop. "You don't understand how hard it is for me. I can't take this life anymore. I wish things were different. I wish you were different." Those words hit Cecilia like a dagger. She felt a knot in her throat but took a deep breath. "Isabella, everything I do is for you, so you can have a better future, so you don't have to go through what I go through every day." "I didn't ask for any of this, Mom," Isabella shouted, tears streaming down her face. "I just wanted a normal life like everyone else. Why can't you be like their moms?" Cecilia tried to move closer, but Isabella took a step back, as if wanting to build a barrier. "I can't take this anymore, Mum. Sometimes I think it would have been better if I had never been born." The last sentence left Cecilia speechless. She watched her daughter run to her room, slamming the door shut behind her. She stood frozen in the living room, feeling empty and defeated. Later, while she tidied up the kitchen in silence, Cecilia found a small old photo she always kept in a drawer. It was of a smiling man next to her, both young and full of dreams. She traced her finger over the image, thinking about how much had changed. "You have no idea, Isabella. If only you knew what I had to give up to protect you," she murmured to herself, as silent tears streamed down her face. As the day came to a close, Cecilia knew she needed to find a way to show Isabella that what truly mattered was the love between them. But at that moment, everything felt lost. The sound of muffled voices echoed through the halls of Elite National School as Cecilia finished sweeping the last traces of dust from the impeccably shiny floor. Even there, bent over the mop, her posture remained upright, as if her dignity couldn't be diminished by her circumstances. But that day the air felt heavier. Every distant laugh, every whisper sounded like a mocking echo, and Cecilia knew it wasn't just her imagination. On the other side of the building, Isabella sat in the last row of the classroom, pretending to pay attention to the history lecture. Her mind was far away. The furtive glances and giggles she had received during recess still resonated in her head. "So, the janitor is your mom?" Marcella's venomous voice echoed again in her memory. Isabella bit her lip, feeling tears threaten to spill. During recess, Isabella walked alone across the courtyard, an unusual sight for someone who was usually surrounded by friends. Marcella, with a smile that resembled a sharp blade, approached with a group of girls. "Isabella, why are you so quiet today? Tired of cleaning bathrooms after class?" The girls laughed in unison. "Shut up, Marcella," Isabella replied, trying to sound firm, but her voice wavered. "Relax, Isa. I'm just saying it makes sense that you always get good grades. Your mom must be spying on the tests while she cleans the classrooms, right?" Marcella continued, and the group laughed even louder. Isabella didn't respond. She just left, her eyes fixed on the ground. She entered the nearest bathroom, locking herself in a stall. Sitting on the toilet, she took a deep breath, trying to hold back her tears. But the tears were more stubborn than she was. Cecilia, on her part, focused on her routine. Every movement was meticulous, almost automatic. She swept, scrubbed, and organized as she always did. But that day, something bothered her. As she crossed paths with a group of students, she noticed them whispering and looking directly at her. It was impossible not to notice their malicious smiles and looks of disdain. "Did you hear? That's Isabella's mom," one of the girls whispered. Cecilia paused for a moment, her heart racing, but she chose not to react. She took a deep breath and continued her work. At lunchtime, while cleaning the cafeteria, Principal Almeida appeared, his expression as rigid as usual. He approached with firm steps and stopped in front of her. Cecilia, noticing his presence, straightened immediately. "Mrs. Cecilia, can I have a word with you in my office?" His voice was cold, almost accusatory. Cecilia nodded, wiping her hands on her apron before following him. When they arrived in the office, Almeida closed the door and sat behind the desk. Cecilia remained standing, waiting. "I've been informed that your presence at the school is causing distractions among the students," he began, looking at her over his glasses. "Distractions?" Cecilia asked, frowning. "Yes. There are rumors circulating about you and your daughter. This is unacceptable. This school is an institution of excellence, and I cannot allow these incidents to tarnish the reputation of Elite National," he said. Cecilia felt a knot form in her throat. "With all due respect, Mr. Almeida, I do my job with dedication and have never interfered in the students' education." "Perhaps not intentionally," he replied, adjusting his glasses, "but the fact that you are the mother of a student creates a conflict of interest. I am considering your continued employment here, Mrs. Cecilia. I need you to resolve this quickly, or you will be forced to leave your position." "And what about my daughter? She needs the education this school offers," Cecilia replied, her voice firm, but her eyes beginning to shimmer with contained tears. "That is your problem," Almeida concluded coldly. Not mine. Cecilia left the office with firm steps, but her heart was shattered. She didn't know how she would face this. Isabella was already drifting away from her, and now the job that supported them both was also threatened. That afternoon, while cleaning the women's restroom, Cecilia encountered her colleague Donna Amelia, an older employee known for her wise advice. Amelia immediately noticed the lost look on Cecilia's face and decided to strike up a conversation. "Are you okay, Cecilia? You look like the weight of the world is on your shoulders today," Amelia said as she cleaned the mirrors. Cecilia hesitated, but ended up pouring her heart out. She recounted her conversation with the principal and the issues with Isabella. "My daughter is rejecting me, and now the principal wants to fire me because my presence bothers the students. I feel like I'm losing everything," Cecilia said, her voice thick with emotion. Amelia stopped what she was doing and approached her. "Cecilia, I've worked here for many years and I've seen a lot. But I'll tell you this, no mother should carry the weight of shame for loving and protecting her child. The problem is not you, it's this place." Cecilia looked at Amelia, grateful for the support but still feeling the weight of the situation. "There's something I've never told anyone, Amelia," she began, her voice low. "I've made sacrifices to give Isabella a different life. I left behind opportunities, money, even people who could have made my life easier. But I did it to protect her, so she would never have to live with certain shadows from the past." Amelia furrowed her brow, intrigued. "What kind of sacrifice, Cecilia?" "I have a box," Cecilia continued, hesitating. "Inside it are things Isabella doesn't know about. I don't know if I should ever tell her, it might be worse." "If those things could hurt her, you did what you thought was best," Amelia said. "But sometimes secrets can also bind us to the past." Cecilia nodded slowly. She knew Amelia was right. But the thought of opening that box, of exposing everything, was too frightening. That day, on her way home, Cecilia felt the weight of the world on her shoulders. She needed to find a way to protect Isabella, save her job, and perhaps confront the past she so feared. But how? Before we dive into the next chapter, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, hit the like button, and leave a comment about your thoughts on the story so far. Your support is crucial for the growth of this channel. Now let's continue with the story. The sound of laughter echoed through the school corridors, like a constant hammer pounding against Isabella's ears. She hurried along, trying to remain unnoticed, but the weight of the stairs seemed to follow her wherever she went. During the break, while she tried to hide in the furthest corner of the courtyard, Marcella appeared, accompanied by a group of classmates who never missed a chance to mock someone. "Look who's here, everyone. The Princess of Cleaning," Marcella said, her smile radiating cruelty. Isabella closed her eyes for a moment, wishing to disappear. But before she could react, Marcella continued, "Has your mom cleaned the principal's bathroom today? Or is she still busy eavesdropping on what the teachers say about the tests?" The group laughed loudly, and Isabella felt her face flush with shame. She knew that if she showed any sign of weakness, it would only get worse. So she tried to respond firmly. "Leave my mom out of this, Marcella. At least she works for a living, unlike those who only know how to hide behind their parents' money." Marcella's smile disappeared for an instant, but it quickly returned, even sharper. "Oh, how cute. Defending mommy. Maybe she should teach you how to scrub the floor. That way you'll learn for the future, right?" The words pierced Isabella like a knife. She felt tears welling up, but she held back the sobs with all her strength. Without saying another word, she lightly shoved Marcella aside to create a path and ran to the bathroom. Locked inside a stall, she let the tears fall freely. "Why is this happening to me?" she murmured, feeling the weight of shame and anger. She thought of Cecilia and felt a mix of guilt and resentment. She wanted to defend her, but at the same time she couldn't help wishing her mother were different, someone who didn't put her in this position. That night at home, the atmosphere was as heavy as the school corridors. Cecilia was in the kitchen, preparing dinner with the few ingredients she had. Beans, rice, and a small piece of meat were all she could offer that day. The familiar scent of seasoning filled the small apartment, but it didn't bring the comfort it usually did. Isabella lay in her bed staring at the ceiling. She could still hear Marcella's words echoing in her mind. When Cecilia called her for dinner, she took her time responding. Finally, she appeared in the kitchen, her face expressionless, but her eyes still revealing her hurt. "Come eat, sweetheart. I made your favorite food," Cecilia said, trying to sound cheerful. Isabella looked at the plate but didn't sit down. "I'm not hungry," Cecilia insisted, her voice quiet. "You need to eat, Isa. You spent the entire day at school. You must be tired." "I already said I'm not hungry," Isabella exploded, her voice laden with frustration. Cecilia fell silent for a moment, trying to keep her composure. "Isabella, I know things are tough. I know you're upset with me about what happened at school, but—" "You don't know anything," Isabella interrupted, tears streaming down her face. "You don't know what it's like to be humiliated every day, to hear jokes, to see people laughing at me because of you." Cecilia's heart ached, but she tried to get closer. "Isa, I do all of this for you. I work at this school because I want to give you the best education possible. I want you to have opportunities that I never had." "I didn't ask for this. I didn't ask for any of this," Isabella shouted, her voice echoing through the small apartment. "I just wanted you to be like other moms, to have a normal job, so I wouldn't have to go through this." Cecilia didn't respond immediately. She stood there looking at her daughter. Finally, with a choked voice, she said, "Do you think I don't want to give you a better life, Isa? Do you think this is easy for me? I carry the weight of the world on my shoulders every day just to see you smile, and you think I don't care?" But Isabella had already turned her back. She ran to her room and slammed the door shut, leaving Cecilia alone in the kitchen. Cecilia sat at the table, staring at the two untouched plates of food. Tears streamed silently down her face. She picked up a napkin and wiped her eyes, but the knot in her throat remained. After a few minutes, she got up and went to a small drawer in the living room cabinet. From it, she took out an old wooden box that carried a scent of nostalgia and pain. She sat on the couch and carefully opened the lid. Inside was a collection of photos and papers yellowed with age. Cecilia picked up a specific photo. It showed her, years younger, next to a tall, elegant man. He had a confident smile and held Cecilia at the waist as if he were protecting her from the world. But the memory that photo brought was anything but comforting. "You promised to take care of us," Cecilia murmured, looking at the face in the photo. "But it was because of you that I had to make choices that destroyed me." She closed her eyes and memories came rushing back like an avalanche. It was a hot summer afternoon when Cecilia met Raphael, a charismatic businessman who seemed to have it all: money, charm, and a bright future. He quickly won her over, promising the world and more. But as the relationship progressed, Raphael's facade began to crumble. He was controlling, possessive, and eventually became violent. When Cecilia found out she was pregnant, Raphael reacted with rage. "You're not going to ruin my life with this baby," he yelled, throwing a glass against the wall. It was then that Cecilia made the hardest decision of her life. She left Raphael and refused any help from him, even knowing he was rich enough to support the child effortlessly. She chose to start over, alone, rather than expose Isabella to her father's destructive temper. Cecilia returned to the present with a heavy sigh. She put the photo back in the box and closed the lid, as if locking away that chapter of her life once more. As she prepared for bed, she thought about Isabella. She knew her daughter was hurt, but she also knew she couldn't share this secret yet. "One day, you will understand, my daughter," Cecilia murmured to herself. "One day, you will see that everything I did was out of love." Night fell over the small apartment, bringing a tense silence that only time could dissipate. The day began like any other for Isabella, but the persistent pain from the taunts made each step towards school feel like a sentence. Upon arriving, she kept her head down, avoiding glances and searching for a secluded spot in the courtyard. It was the first class of the day, and she knew Marcella and the other girls were lurking, ready for more humiliations. During the break, sitting alone near a tree in the corner of the courtyard, Isabella noticed David, a classmate who rarely got involved in the social turmoil. He was different, always quiet, with a look that seemed to understand more than he said. He approached slowly, holding 2 disposable cups of juice. "You look like you could use one of these," David said with a shy smile, extending the cup. Isabella hesitated before accepting. "Thank you," she murmured, looking at the ground. "I saw what happened yesterday," he continued, sitting beside her. "Marcella is cruel, but what she says doesn't define you or your mother." Isabella quickly lifted her eyes, surprised. "You don't understand," she said, her voice tinged with bitterness. "It's easy to say that when you're not the target, when it's not your mother being ridiculed." David nodded, seeming to ponder his words before responding. "Maybe I don't completely understand, but no one should go through this alone. You don't have to face everyone at once. Sometimes all you need is someone to listen." For a moment, Isabella felt the weight on her shoulders lighten, but she soon pushed the feeling away. "I'm fine," she replied, standing up, "but thanks for the juice." She left before David could respond, leaving the nearly full cup on the bench. Although she appreciated the gesture, her wounded pride and internal confusion kept her from accepting any kind of support. Meanwhile, Cecilia was at school, facing her own silent battle. During the lunch break, when she opened the locker where she kept her belongings, she found a folded piece of paper. The paper looked new, contrasting with the other worn-out items she used daily. Curious, Cecilia unfolded the note and read, "Secrets have short legs. How long do you think it will be before everyone knows who you really are?" The note was anonymous, but the implicit threat was clear. Cecilia felt her heart race, her fingers trembling as they held the paper. She looked around, trying to identify who might have placed it there, but the hallway was empty. She tucked the note into her pocket, but the weight of the words felt heavier than she could bear. Her mind began to spin with possibilities. Who knows about my past? Did Raphael tell someone? The memory of the man she had left behind resurfaced like an unwanted shadow, haunting her once again. She spent the rest of the period distracted, constantly glancing over her shoulder. The note wasn't just a threat. It was a reminder that her carefully guarded past could come back to destroy everything she had built. At home, Isabella still couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The rejection of David's kindness left her unsettled, but the growing distance between her and Cecilia hurt even more. In the afternoon, while searching for an old notebook in the living room, her eyes fell on a half-open drawer in the cabinet. The drawer held a wooden box that Isabella had never noticed before. There was something intriguing about it, something that seemed to call for her attention. After a moment of hesitation, she pulled out the box and sat on the floor. When she opened the lid, she found a collection of papers, letters, and old photos. One of them immediately caught her eye, a picture of Cecilia, many years younger, smiling next to an elegant man. The man had his arm around Cecilia's waist, and there was something in the sparkle of his eyes that suggested a deep intimacy. On the back of the photo, Isabella found a name scrawled with a date: Raphael Smith, March 15, 2008. The name sounded strange and familiar at the same time. "Who is he?" Isabella murmured to herself, turning the photo over and over as if it could offer more answers. Why had her mother never mentioned this man? And why did the date seem so significant? As she continued to rummage through the box, she found letters signed by Raphael, but most were incomplete or torn. The content alternated between declarations of love and an aggressive tone that made her uncomfortable. "My mother was with him," Isabella thought, her eyes scanning the scribbled words. But why didn't she ever tell me? What happened between them? When Cecilia came home, she found Isabella sitting in the living room with the box open beside her. The shock on Cecilia's face was immediate as she dropped her bag on the floor. "What are you doing?" Cecilia asked, her voice high and filled with urgency. "Who is Raphael Smith, Mum?" Isabella replied, holding the photo as if it were evidence of a crime. "Why didn't you ever tell me about him?" Cecilia felt the ground disappear beneath her feet. Her secret, the one she had kept for so many years, was now exposed. The words stuck in her throat as she tried to find an answer that explained without revealing too much. He doesn't matter," she finally replied, her voice trembling. "This is all in the past, Isabella. It has nothing to do with you." "It has nothing to do with me," Isabella shouted, standing up. "You always said you did everything for me, that you sacrificed your life to protect me. And now I find out there's a man, letters, photos, and you think it has nothing to do with me." Cecilia closed her eyes, feeling the weight of years of silence threatening to crush her. "Isabella, I promised myself you would never have to deal with this. Everything I did was to protect you." "Protect me from what, Mum?" Isabella insisted, her voice choked with tears. "You say you protect me, but you keep secrets and leave me in the dark. How can I trust you if I don't even know who you really are?" Cecilia took a deep breath, trying to remain calm. "I will tell you everything, Isabella, but not now. I just need some time." Isabella shook her head, incredulous. "Always time, always a secret. Maybe Marcella is right. Maybe I'll never know the truth." She ran to her room, slamming the door shut behind her. Cecilia stood frozen in the middle of the living room, staring at the open box and feeling the crushing weight of the choices she had made in the past. Slowly she sank onto the sofa, picking up the photo that Isabella had dropped on the floor. Raphael's eyes in the picture seemed to mock her, reminding her that secrets don't stay buried forever. That night, as silence filled the small apartment, Cecilia knew the time had come to confront the past she had feared for so long. The night had barely passed for Isabella, who lay in bed staring at the ceiling of her room. The box was still next to her desk, as if it were a living entity pulsing with questions unanswered. The images of the elegant man and the cards with enigmatic words wouldn't leave her mind. There was something much bigger hidden there, and she knew that the only person capable of filling in the gaps was Cecilia. When morning came, Isabella left her room and found her mother in the kitchen preparing coffee. The aroma of fresh coffee and warmed bread seemed to try to create a false sense of normalcy, but the tension between the two was palpable. "Good morning, Isa," Cecilia began, her tone hesitant, not looking directly at her daughter. "Who is he, Mom?" Isabella shot back, completely ignoring the greeting. Cecilia stopped the movement of the knife she had been using to slice the bread and took a deep breath before turning to face her daughter. "I already told you it's not the right time to talk about this," Cecilia replied, trying to sound firm, but the hesitation in her voice betrayed her discomfort. "The right time? When will it be, Mum? You've hidden things from me my entire life, and now when I finally find something that might explain why everything is so complicated, you say it's not the time." Cecilia felt a knot form in her throat. She wiped her hands on her apron, trying to buy time to formulate a response. "Isabella, some things are harder to explain than you imagine. It's not that I don't want you to know, but I want to protect you." "Protect from what?" Isabella retorted, her voice raised. "You always say that, but I'm not a child anymore. Do you think hiding the truth will protect me? Because so far all you've done is leave me confused and alone." Cecilia took a step forward, but Isabella instinctively recoiled, creating an invisible barrier between them. "Please listen to me," Cecilia began, her voice trembling. "The only thing that matters is that I did all of this for you. Everything I sacrificed, everything I faced, was to give you a chance at a better life. If you really wanted to protect me, you would have been honest from the start," Isabella shot back, turning her back and grabbing her backpack. "But it seems honesty was never your strong suit." Cecilia stood there speechless as she heard the sound of the door slamming shut. At school, Isabella didn't get a break. During literature class, while the teacher explained about family tragedies in Shakespeare's works, Marcella decided to add her dose of poison to Isabella's day. "Isn't it funny how these stories of troubled families are so timeless?" Marcella began casually, but loud enough for everyone to hear. "I mean, I'm sure some people here can relate," especially those with mothers who clean bathrooms while pretending to be something they're not. Isabella's face immediately flushed red, but before she could respond, Marcella continued, turning to her. Or maybe it's something more. Perhaps it's not just a question of status. Who knows, maybe you don't even know who your father is, Isa. That would explain a lot, wouldn't it? The snickers in the room were muffled, but Isabella heard them like thunder. Each of Marcella's words felt like a blow, and she felt tears welling up in her eyes. "Enough!" Isabella yelled, standing up from her chair. "You don't know anything about me or my mother." Marcella feigned an innocent air. "Oh, don't I? Then maybe you can clarify, because from what I hear, your mom has some rather interesting secrets." The teacher finally intervened, telling Marcella to be quiet, but the damage was already done. Isabella ran out of the classroom, ignoring the teacher's pleas for her to come back. She sprinted to the bathroom, locking herself in a stall, her chest rising and falling rapidly as she tried to control her crying. Marcella's words echoed in her mind. Did everyone know more about her mother than she did? Meanwhile, Cecilia was in another wing of the school, cleaning tables in a meeting room when she heard voices coming from the hallway. It wasn't uncommon for students to pass by, but the tone of the voices caught her attention. "I heard her daughter is an accident," one young voice said, laughing. "Yeah, and that the father is some rich guy who abandoned the two of them," another responded. Cecilia stopped cleaning, the cloth still in her hand as her heart began to race. She discreetly left the room and saw two students leaning against the wall, laughing and whispering. "Do you think it's funny to talk about other people's lives?" Cecilia asked, her voice firm and filled with indignation. The students froze, surprised to see her. One of them tried to stammer an apology, but Cecilia didn't give them a chance. "Do you think you know anything? Well, let me tell you something. Those who spread rumors are not just cruel, but also cowards. And cowardice is never something to be proud of." Before they could respond, she turned and walked down the hallway, leaving the two students in embarrassed silence. Later, while cleaning another room, she heard a loud laugh and recognized Marcella's voice. The young girl was surrounded by a group of friends, speaking loudly as always. "You should have seen her face when I mentioned her dad. It was like I hit her right where it hurts." Cecilia entered the room without hesitation, interrupting the conversation. Marcella immediately stopped laughing upon seeing Cecilia, but tried to maintain her composure. "Oh, hello, Mrs. Cecilia," Marcella said with a cynical smile. "How's work going today?" "Not as hard as it must be to live with a heavy conscience, Marcella," Cecilia replied, her voice sharp as a blade. The group fell silent. "You think it's funny to humiliate people, don't you? Talking about what you don't know, spreading lies. Is that what makes you feel superior?" Cecilia continued, stepping closer. Marcella attempted to respond, but Cecilia interrupted her. "Let me say this. You can laugh at me, but if you keep hurting my daughter, you will find out that I'm not as insignificant as you think." Marcella averted her gaze, trying to mask her embarrassment. "Come on, guys," she finally said, turning to leave. Cecilia watched as she departed, the group following in silence. When she was alone again, she felt her legs weaken and had to lean against a table to regain her breath. The battle wasn't won, but for now she had shown that she wouldn't back down. Still, the weight of it all felt heavier than ever. She knew she couldn't protect Isabella from everything, and the past she tried to bury was getting closer to the surface every day. The sound of rain tapping against the window seemed to synchronize with the rapid beats of Cecilia's heart as she gazed at the horizon through the fogged glass. That grey afternoon, many years ago, had marked the beginning of a life that would never be the same. She was young, full of dreams, and believed the world was in her hands. Raphael seemed like the perfect partner to share those dreams, charismatic, ambitious, and willing to protect her from everything. Cecilia still remembered the intense sparkle in his eyes and the promises that made her heart race. "I'm going to take care of you, Cecilia," he said, holding her hands as if she were the most precious thing in the world. With me, you'll never have to worry about anything. Her trust in Raphael was absolute. In the first few months of their relationship, he seemed attentive, making Cecilia believe the future would be as bright as the starry nights they used to admire together. They planned a modest wedding, a house in an elegant neighborhood, and even discussed names for the children they would one day have. But the dream began to crumble when Cecilia discovered she was pregnant. That day, with the test in hand, she felt a mix of euphoria and anxiety. She imagined how Raphael would react, believing he would be thrilled. "I'm going to be a dad," Raphael asked, the smile on his face disappearing as quickly as it had appeared. Cecilia nodded, her eyes shining with hope. "Yes, Raphael, isn't it amazing? We can build our family now, everything we planned." But he withdrew, rubbing his temples as if trying to process bad news. "Cecilia, you know what this means. This wasn't in the plans. I have so much to resolve at the company. I can't deal with this right now." She tried to argue, but Raphael grew increasingly cold. At first he just distanced himself emotionally, but soon his behavior turned aggressive. One night, while they argued about the pregnancy, Raphael lost control. "You're ruining my life," he shouted, throwing a glass against the wall. Cecilia recoiled, her hands protecting her belly. In that moment she realized there was no love left. It was the following morning that Cecilia made the decision that would change her life. She packed a small bag, put the little money she had in an envelope, and walked out the door without looking back. Raphael was in his office, and she knew that if she stayed one more day, the toxic environment would destroy not only her happiness, but also the safety of the child she carried. Sitting on her bed that night, many years later, Cecilia reflected on the choice that had shaped her as a mother and a woman. The dim light of the lamp illuminated the room as she held a photo of Isabella as a child, with a toothless smile and eyes full of innocence. "I did what I had to do," she murmured, almost like a prayer. From the moment she left, Cecilia dedicated herself entirely to creating a safe home for Isabella. Despite all the challenges, she always put her daughter first. It was never easy. She worked long hours, sacrificed her own dreams, and swallowed daily humiliations to ensure Isabella had a dignified life. She remembered when Isabella was small, still learning to walk. Cecilia worked as a waitress during the day and cleaned offices at night. She came home exhausted, but her daughter's smile made it all worthwhile. "Mommy, you're the best," Isabella would say, hugging Cecilia with her tiny arms. "No, my love. You are the best thing that ever happened to me," Cecilia would reply, holding back tears. Now, seeing how her relationship with Isabella was fraying, Cecilia wondered if she had done enough. Keeping secrets had been her way of protecting her daughter, but deep down, she feared that silence was destroying their connection. "Has the time come to tell the truth?" she wondered, stroking the edge of the photo. But the idea of reliving the past and worse, exposing Isabella to Raphael's shadows, paralyzed her. She took a deep breath, putting the photo away again. She knew Isabella deserved answers, but she needed to find the right moment to reveal the complete story. The next morning, Isabella was in the classroom, wearing her headphones while waiting for class to start. She still felt the weight of Marcella's words and the gaps left by her mother's evasive answers. No matter how hard she tried to focus on her schoolwork, her mind kept drifting to the letters and photos she had found. When the break arrived, Isabella quietly walked down the hall to the teacher's lounge, where she knew Cecilia might be. Upon approaching, she heard familiar voices, her mother and a colleague, Donna Amelia. "You need to stop carrying this alone, Cecilia," Amelia said, her tone gentle yet firm. "Secrets weigh more than you can imagine, especially when they involve the people we love." "I know that, Amelia," Cecilia replied, her voice tense. "But how can I tell Isabella that I left her father, that he was a violent and selfish man, that he tried to force me to have an abortion?" Isabella froze behind the door, her heart racing. Her mother's words echoed like thunder in her mind. "You did it to protect her," Amelia insisted. "And she is strong, Cecilia. Maybe stronger than you think. Sharing the truth could help both of you understand each other." There was a pause, and Isabella could almost feel the weight of the silence. "Maybe you're right," Cecilia finally said, but her voice was laden with doubt. Isabella took a few steps back, feeling as if the ground was disappearing beneath her feet. All the anger she had felt towards her mother now gave way to a mix of shock and sadness. Cecilia had faced much more than Isabella could ever imagine, and all of it to protect her. But at the same time, Isabella couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to the story. Why was Raphael still such a prominent presence in Cecilia's life, even after all these years? Why did her mother continue to carry the weight of that past alone? As she walked back to her classroom, Isabella knew the answers wouldn't come easily, but she was determined to uncover them. Cecilia's past was no longer just a mystery. It was an essential piece to understanding who they were and what connected them. That night, when Cecilia came home, she found Isabella sitting at the table with a serious expression. "Mom, I want to know everything," Isabella said without preamble. "I want to understand who I am and why you did what you did." Cecilia took a deep breath, feeling that the moment she had dreaded had finally arrived. Thank you for watching this far. If you're enjoying the story, make sure to subscribe, like, and share your thoughts in the comments. Every interaction helps this channel grow and bring you more amazing stories. Let's get back to it. The auditorium of Elite National School was packed, with parents chatting animatedly as they awaited the start of the parent-teacher meeting. Cecilia felt out of place there, dressed in a simple blouse and jeans that contrasted sharply with the impeccably tailored suits and designer dresses around her. It was a sensation she was all too familiar with, but it never failed to make her uncomfortable. She was there for Isabella, as always. She sat in one of the back benches, far from the stage where the teachers and Principal Almeida were organizing papers and testing the microphone. Cecilia tried to keep her head down, but she couldn't help but overhear whispers. "That's her, the janitor," said a female voice, muffled but clear enough for Cecilia to catch. "How does someone like that manage to get her daughter here?" She took a deep breath, fighting to ignore the comments, when a familiar figure walked by her, face twisted in sarcasm. Marcella, accompanied by her mother, who looked as venomous as her daughter. "What are you doing here?" Marcella asked with a malicious grin. "I didn't know parent meetings were open to staff." Before Cecilia could respond, Marcella's mother interjected. "Marcella, dear, perhaps Miss Cecilia is here to do an emergency cleaning." The muffled laughter that followed made Cecilia clench her hands in her lap, trying to maintain her composure. The meeting began with Principal Almeida discussing the school's academic performance and goals for the upcoming semester. Throughout the presentation, Cecilia felt the stares directed at her, but she remained still, determined to stay until the end. Then Marcella raised her hand, interrupting the presentation. "Principal, excuse me. I just wanted to understand how the scholarship process works, because some people here are clearly outside the school's standards." The ensuing silence was deafening. All eyes turned to Cecilia, who felt her cheeks burn with embarrassment. Almeida tried to deflect the focus, but Marcella's mother, smiling as if she were enjoying a show, added, "Yes, I think it would be interesting to know how certain advantages are granted." Cecilia could take it no longer. She slowly stood up, drawing even more attention. "Excuse me," she began, her voice steady despite the nervousness bubbling inside her. "I would like to clarify something." The room fell silent. Everyone expected her to apologize or leave, but she remained resolute. "I am Isabella's mother, yes, and I work here, as everyone knows. But I have never at any point used my position to gain any advantage. My daughter is in this school because she deserves to be here, because I have worked tirelessly to ensure she had this opportunity." Marcella let out a quiet snicker, but Cecilia ignored her. "And before anyone else suggests that I'm here to take advantage, I want to say one thing. I had the chance to give Isabella a much easier life, to provide her with everything money can buy, but I chose to protect my daughter instead." A murmur swept through the room. Cecilia continued, now looking directly at Marcella and her mother. I turned down a multi-million-dollar inheritance from Isabella's father. Yes, her father was rich and powerful, but he was also dangerous. He wanted to control our lives, impose conditions. I chose to run away, to start from scratch, to ensure my daughter grew up free and safe. The impact of her words was immediate. Some parents looked shocked, others embarrassed. Even Principal Almeida seemed at a loss for how to react. Marcela, her face flushed with anger and shame, tried to speak, but her mother held her arm, pulling her back into her seat. Cecilia, her heart racing, returned to her place. Later at home, Isabella was sitting on the couch, flipping through a book but clearly distracted. When Cecilia walked in, exhausted but relieved, Isabella looked up at her with an expression that mixed surprise and admiration. "Mom, I heard what happened at the meeting," Isabella began, her voice low. Cecilia sighed, sitting down beside her daughter. "I didn't want you to find out like this, but it reached a point where I couldn't stay silent anymore." Isabella studied her for a moment before asking, "You turned down an inheritance because of me. Why didn't you ever tell me that?" Cecilia smiled sadly, taking her daughter's hands. "Because it wasn't something to be proud of, Isa. I always thought that if you knew, you might think I made the wrong choice, that I should have accepted the money to give you an easier life." I don't know what to think," Isabella admitted, her eyes filling with tears. "But I know you did what you thought was right. And even though I blamed you for many things, I think I finally start to understand." Cecilia pulled her daughter into a hug, holding her tightly as if trying to shield her from all the world's suffering. "I just wanted to give you a better life, Isa. A life that was truly yours and not controlled by someone like Raphael." Isabella nodded, tears streaming down her cheeks now. "I'm so sorry, Mom, for everything I said, for doubting you." Cecilia kissed the top of her daughter's head, feeling her heart finally find some peace. "I'm sorry too, my love, but we're in this together and that's all that matters." In that moment, as they embraced, it felt like all the hurts and misunderstandings began to dissolve. The road ahead would still be long, but for the first time in a long while, there was hope that they could rebuild the bond that had always been the foundation of their lives. The sun had barely risen on the horizon when Isabella arrived at school, determined to face what had once made her shrink back. The confrontation with Marcela was inevitable, but this time, she felt something different. After everything she had learned about her mother's past, Isabella carried a new kind of strength. When Marcela appeared in the courtyard during the break, surrounded by her usual followers, Isabella saw her opportunity. The girl wasted no time and launched a mocking comment, just as she did almost every day. "Look who's here," Marcela said, her tone heavy with disdain. "The cleaning princess. Still cleaning up after your mother, huh, Isa?" But this time Isabella didn't back down. She walked up to Marcela, stopping just inches away. Her classmates around them fell silent, surprised by the courage they had never seen in her before. "Marcela, don't you ever get tired of being so insignificant?" Isabella began, her voice calm but filled with determination. Marcela blinked, taken aback. "What did you just say?" "You heard me loud and clear," Isabella replied, lifting her chin. "You spend your whole day trying to humiliate me, but all you prove is how small and petty you truly are. My mother may clean bathrooms, but at least she does something worthy. And you? What's your contribution to the world besides spreading poison?" The courtyard fell even more silent. Marcela opened her mouth to respond but couldn't find the words. "You talk about my mother as if it's something to be ashamed of, but you know what's really shameful," Isabella continued, now locking eyes with Marcela. "Being someone like you, someone who needs to step on others to feel important." Marcela's group began to disperse, unable to sustain the public humiliation. Some of the classmates who had laughed with Marcela now looked at Isabella with admiration. Finally broken, Marcela mumbled something incomprehensible before turning her back and leaving the courtyard. Isabella felt a mix of relief and pride. For the first time, she felt she had delivered justice not only for herself, but also for her mother. Meanwhile, Cecilia was in Principal Almeida's office. called in for an unexpected conversation. Sitting in the leather chair in front of the imposing wooden desk, she tried to stay calm as Almeida flipped through some papers. "Mrs. Cecilia," he began, finally lifting his eyes, "I want to start this conversation by offering an apology." Cecilia frowned, confused. "An apology?" Almeida sighed, looking uncomfortable. "Yes, I have treated you unfairly, often underestimating your value in this school. Recent events have opened my eyes to something I should have recognized earlier. Your work here is more important than I imagined." Cecilia didn't respond immediately. It wasn't common to hear something so close to a compliment from the principal. "I received feedback from some teachers and students," Almeida continued, "and honestly, I was impressed by the positive impact you have. Additionally, I learned about what happened at the parents' meeting. It was a courageous gesture, and it made me realize we haven't valued you enough." Cecilia remained silent, trying to process his words. "That's why I want to offer you an opportunity," Almeida said, leaning slightly forward. "We are creating a new position to supervise the cleaning and maintenance teams with a salary increase and additional benefits. I believe you would be perfect to lead this team." For a moment, Cecilia felt as if the ground had vanished beneath her feet. The proposal was more than she had ever hoped for. I don't know what to say," Cecilia finally responded. "Say that you accept," Almeida said with a rare smile. Cecilia took a deep breath, looking at her clasped hands in her lap. Accepting would mean not only a significant improvement in her financial situation, but also recognition for all her hard work. "I accept," she said, her voice firm yet filled with emotion. That night at home, Cecilia shared the news with Isabella while they prepared dinner together. The small kitchen was warmed by the scent of rice and beans, and the yellow overhead light created a cozy atmosphere. "You deserve it, Mom," Isabella said as she chopped vegetables. "I know how hard you work." Cecilia looked at her daughter, feeling a wave of gratitude and love. It was as if the barriers that had formed between them were finally dissolving. "And I know how much you've been through, Isa," Cecilia replied, placing her hand on her daughter's shoulder. "I'm so sorry for all the times you felt alone or confused. I just wanted to protect you. But maybe I was wrong not to share more with you." "No, Mom, I understand now," Isabella said, turning to face Cecilia. "I know you did everything for me, and if I didn't say it before, I want to say it now. I'm proud of you." Isabella's words brought tears to Cecilia's eyes. She pulled her daughter into a tight embrace, feeling as if years of hurt and pain were being washed away in that moment. "I'm proud of you too, my daughter," Cecilia said, her voice choked with emotion. That night, as they had dinner, the two laughed and talked like they hadn't done in a long time. It was the beginning of a new phase, one where they would work together to overcome any challenge that came their way. And as the sound of their laughter filled the small apartment, it seemed that for the first time in a long while the future was full of hope. The sun bathed the schoolyard in warm light, but Isabella barely noticed as she walked through the hallways. It was just another ordinary day, except for the buzz that echoed around her. A new rumor had surfaced, a variation of the same taunts that Marcella and her group relentlessly threw around. "I heard her dad is some millionaire who abandoned her mom and ran away," one girl commented loudly, not caring to be discreet. "Does she even know who he is? Or did her mom not have the courage to tell her?" another replied, laughing. Isabella felt the comment hit her like a cold gust of wind, but unlike before, she didn't hesitate. She stopped in the middle of the hallway, lifted her chin, and looked directly at the girls. "Are you done?" she asked, her voice calm but firm. The girls, caught off guard, didn't know how to respond. "You can keep spreading rumors as much as you want, but I will continue being me. And honestly, your opinions don't change anything." Without waiting for a reply, Isabella turned and walked to her classroom. She felt the freedom that came with maturity, the weight of others' opinions becoming increasingly insignificant. The awkward silence that lingered behind her was her small victory of the day. Meanwhile, Cecilia was finishing another morning of work. The new position had brought challenges and responsibilities she had never imagined taking on, but it also brought a satisfaction that was new to her. She finally felt recognized. As she stepped out for lunch, she spotted a familiar figure sitting at one of the outdoor tables of a small cafe near the school. It was Anna Clara, a childhood friend Cecilia hadn't seen in years. "Cecilia?" Anna Clara exclaimed, her eyes lighting up in surprise. Cecilia smiled, feeling a wave of nostalgia. "Anna Clara, it's been ages." The two embraced warmly before sitting down together. The conversation flowed quickly, as if the years of distance didn't exist. Anna Clara shared about her successful career as a manager of a renowned restaurant in the city. "And you, Cecilia, how are you?" Anna Clara asked sincerely. Cecilia hesitated but decided to be honest. "It's been a struggle, to be honest, raising Isabella alone, working, but things are getting better now. I got promoted recently and that has made a huge difference." Anna Clara smiled. "I'm so happy for you. But you know, I always thought you were much more than what the world allowed you to be. There's still room to dream, Cecilia." Cecilia laughed softly. "Dreaming isn't easy when you spend so much time just surviving." Anna Clara leaned in, her eyes shining with determination. "Then let's do something about it. I need a supervisor at my restaurant. The pay is much better, and you'd have a calmer environment. What do you think?" Cecilia's eyes widened, surprised. "Are you serious?" "Totally," Anna Clara replied, a wide smile on her face. "And honestly, I'd love to have someone I trust." Cecilia fell silent for a moment, processing the offer. It was an opportunity that could change everything. "I need to think," she finally said. "Of course, but don't take too long," Anna Clara replied, winking. "This chance is yours if you want it." That night, Isabella was in her room organizing her notebooks when she stumbled upon a box she had forgotten. It was one of the few things Cecilia had kept from the past, and Isabella knew that inside lay clues about what her mother didn't say. Inside the box, Isabella found some old letters. Most were worn, with the words nearly faded, but one was surprisingly intact. It was signed by Raphael. "Cecilia, I still can't believe you left. I tried to find you, but it seems you made a point to disappear. I don't know why you're doing this to me, but I want you to know I still think about you. And most of all, I think about the baby. You can't keep me away like this. I deserve to be part of this too." Isabella read the letter several times, absorbing every word. It was the first time she had seen something concrete about the man who was her father. When Cecilia entered the room, Isabella was holding the letter, her face a mix of curiosity and apprehension. "Mom," she began hesitantly, "I think I want to know more about him, about my dad." Cecilia stopped at the door, surprised by the direct declaration. For a moment, she considered saying it wasn't the right time, but she realized she could no longer postpone this conversation. "All right, Isa," Cecilia said, sitting down next to her daughter. "If you're ready, I am too." They spent the night talking. Cecilia recounted how she met Raphael, the happy moments and the difficult ones, and the reason she chose to leave. She held nothing back, not even the mistakes she made along the way. Isabella listened attentively, absorbing every detail. For the first time, she began to understand the weight of her mother's choices. "He wasn't entirely bad, Isa," Cecilia said, looking at the letter in her daughter's hands. "But he was selfish. He thought more about himself than anything else, and I couldn't risk letting him control our lives." Isabella nodded, tears filling her eyes. "I understand, Mum. Thank you for protecting me, but I think I need to know more about him, not because I want to bring him back, but because it's part of who I am." Cecilia held her daughter's hands, gripping them tightly. "I will help you, Isa. Together we'll find out what you need to know." That night, as they talked and planned how to explore the past, the bond between them felt stronger than ever. It was the beginning of a new journey, not just to uncover the truth behind Raphael's story, but also to reinforce the future they were building together. The car parked in front of an imposing mansion, whose faded paint and slightly unkempt garden couldn't hide the grandeur of the building. Cecilia looked at Isabella, who took a deep breath, hesitant to open the door. This was the first time the two had visited the place where Raphael, Isabella's father, had lived before disappearing from their lives. "Are you sure you want to do this?" Cecilia asked, her voice laden with concern. Isabella nodded, although her expression betrayed the mixture of anxiety and curiosity she felt. "I need to. It's not about him, but about understanding. I think I'll only be able to move forward if I know what his life was like." Cecilia got out of the car first, adjusting her bag on her shoulder. The sound of a creaking iron gate drew the attention of an elderly woman who appeared on the mansion's wide porch. She wore an elegant floral dress and leaned on a cane, her eyes squinting to identify the visitors. "Can I help you?" the woman asked, her voice hoarse but kind. "Sorry to bother you," Cecilia began, speaking respectfully. "My name is Cecilia, and this is my daughter Isabella. We came here because—" She hesitated, searching for the right words. "We want to know more about Raphael. He lived here, didn't he?" The woman observed them for a moment, her face softening with compassion. "Yes, he lived here. Please come in." They followed the elderly woman into the mansion, where the smell of freshly brewed coffee filled the air. The living room was well decorated, with classic furniture and artworks on the walls, but there was a melancholic silence that Cecilia and Isabella felt immediately. "I am Frau Gertrude," the lady introduced herself as she served coffee for the two. "Raphael was the last owner of this house before I bought it. When he passed away, the property was put up for sale, and when I moved in, I found something that made me want to know more about him." Isabella swallowed hard. "He passed away?" Gertrude nodded, her expression filled with sorrow. "Yes, my dear. It was about 6 months ago. I didn't know him personally, but as I organized the house, I found something that made me understand he carried many pains and regrets." "So what are you talking about?" Cecilia asked, trying to stay calm. Gertrude slowly got up and walked over to an antique cabinet, taking out a carefully decorated wooden box. She placed the box on the table and pushed it towards Isabella. "I found this in his office," Gertrude said. "These are letters he wrote to you both, Cecilia and Isabella. He never sent them, but I kept them, thinking that if you ever showed up, you should have them." Isabella opened the box with trembling hands. Inside, there were several carefully folded letters and some photographs of Raphael at different stages of his life. The letters were recent, written shortly before his death. She picked one up and began to read silently, her eyes filling with tears as she absorbed each word. "Cecilia, I have made so many mistakes that I lost count. I spent my life blaming the world for my failures, but the truth is that I was weak. I should have fought for you and our daughter. I spent the last years thinking about what could have been, and that consumed me. I know my words now are too late, but I want you to know that I always thought of you. I hope that one day you can forgive me." Cecilia watched her daughter, trying to interpret her expressions. When Isabella finished, she looked up, tears streaming down her face. "He regretted it," Isabella whispered, her voice breaking. "He knew he was wrong, but he never had the courage to make it right." Cecilia held her daughter's hand. "He made choices that defined him, Isa, but that doesn't have to define you. You are so much more." Gertrude watched in silence, giving them space for their moment. After a while she spoke, her voice filled with emotion. "From what I read in the letters, Raphael loved you both, even if he failed to show it. He spent his last months trying to find a way to correct the past, but time was not kind to him." Isabella looked at the elderly woman and then at the box. "Thank you for keeping this for us. It means so much." Back in the car as they drove home, Isabella gazed out the window, reflecting on everything she had discovered. On one hand, she felt the emptiness of knowing she would never get the chance to truly know him. On the other, she felt relieved to finally understand part of the story that had always intrigued her. "I spent so much time wanting to know who he was," Isabella said, breaking the silence. "But now that I know, I realize that's not what matters. He was part of my story, but you, Mum, You've always been my strength." Cecilia felt tears welling in her eyes. "Isa, everything I did was for you. From the moment I found out I was pregnant, I knew my mission was to protect you and give you a better life." "And you did," Isabella replied, smiling faintly. "I just took a while to realize that." Cecilia parked the car in front of their apartment building, and they sat there for a moment, absorbing the weight of their conversation. "Thank you for never giving up on me, Mom," Isabella said before opening the car door. "Never, Isa," Cecilia replied, smiling. "Never." Back in the apartment, Cecilia and Isabella decided to start organizing the next steps in their lives. Cecilia told her daughter about the job offer at Anna Clara's restaurant and how it could be an opportunity to improve their quality of life even further. "You should accept, Mom," Isabella said immediately. "It's an incredible chance and you deserve it." "And you?" Cecilia asked. "How are you feeling about everything? About what we discovered today?" Isabella smiled, taking her mother's hand. "I'm at peace, finally." Cecilia nodded, feeling a relief she hadn't felt in years. For the first time, it seemed like everything was in place. "Then let's do this together," Cecilia said, squeezing her daughter's hand. "A new beginning." As the two discussed their plans for the future, the small apartment felt cozier than ever. It was as if the walls carried not only memories of struggle, but now also the promise of better days ahead. And when night fell, Cecilia and Isabella knew that despite everything, they had found strength in each other. The future, although uncertain, seemed brighter than ever. The stories of Cecilia and Isabella remind us that true love is built on sacrifice, resilience, and forgiveness. Even though Raphael's past was marked by mistakes and absences, his final attempt to make amends showed us that it's never too late to acknowledge our faults. Cecilia, with her unwavering strength, taught us that the strongest bonds are created through unconditional love and the determination to protect those we care about. Isabella, by understanding her mother's choices, showed that accepting the past is the key to moving forward. In the end, what truly matters are the connections we build and the people we choose to hold in our hearts. And you? Have you ever reflected on the sacrifices someone made for you, or the ones you've made out of love? What did you think of this emotional story? Share your thoughts in the comments. We'd love to hear from you. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, turn on the notification bell, hit the like button, and leave a comment with your impressions. This is crucial for the growth of our channel and to bring you more heartfelt stories. And before you go, click on the next recommended video in the end screen to keep diving into more touching narratives. Thank you so much for watching. See you in the next story that touches lives.